Welcome to our show and our program, Growing Minds. We are processing many things that may happen for you as a parent, or for you as a pastor, or even as a Sunday school servant. Many of you are facing issues with your kids or your Sunday school students. This program is gearing you up, equipping you with many of the areas that we always are puzzled with and we have a problem to solve. I was very honored to put amazing minds together to really lead this program. You have heard from Sylvia Farag. You have heard from Adli Youssef in coaching. Sylvia Zaki will be speaking tomorrow about processing autism as a speech therapist. You heard from Mina Merham as a psychiatrist regarding stress and anxiety and learning disabilities. And today I'm very happy and honored to really introduce a special guest and a very amazing servant and a colleague, Dr. Christine Agaibi, who is a PhD and a professor at Rowan and Rutgers universities. She is specialized in resilience, but her overarching is, of course, psychology. Christine had done several programs for us on COIC, and many of the parents and Sunday schools and places and service reach out to her to ask her opinion on many of the issues related to resilience in their kids. Christine, I'm very honored and happy to have you today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Hanny. Thank you so much for bringing me onto this program with so many wonderful colleagues in the field of psychology and medicine and related to mental health. And I'm honored to speak to all of you today on how to cultivate resilience from a scientific perspective, from a psychological perspective, during times of challenge. And so thank you again, Dr. Hanny, for bringing me onto this wonderful program. And I want to start by thinking about some of the goals that we have for our children. Obviously, we want our children to grow into responsible individuals, to lead a great spiritual life, to have a good academic career and successes, and great relationships, good emotional health, good well-being, have a meaningful life and morals and values. And obviously, this feels like a tall order when we have so many challenges that we encounter throughout our life. The first thing I want to start off with is it can be quite challenging, again, given the difficulties that we face from day to day, but we always have God's promise that He has a plan for us, a plan to prosper us, and to give us a hope and a future. But despite this, the Bible also talks about having tribulation and to be of good cheer when we have this tribulation because Christ has overcome the world. And even though sometimes the outward person is perishing, the inward person is being renewed day by day. And we're being renewed day by day, both spiritually and psychologically, and we have the ability to grow and to become resilient despite our difficulties and despite the challenges and the struggles that we face. The issue becomes is that oftentimes when I work with therapy clients and with my students, what we see on the outside is much, much less than what is going on deeper and deeper on the inside. What is below the surface is oftentimes much bigger than what we see on top of the surface. And so we shouldn't just take what we see on the surface at face value, but to always work with our kids to see what is underneath the surface that could be contributing to some of the struggles they are facing and the challenges they're going through. So even for your own life, reflecting over the last year or the last couple years, what has that been like for you? What ups and downs have you had? Have there been family difficulties or difficulties in your service? Has there also been areas of growth? Because oftentimes it is very easy to look at the areas of challenge and the areas of difficulty, but we neglect to look at the areas of growth. So have you learned something in your struggles? Have you learned something about yourself and those around you? Have you been able to dig out some strengths about yourself that you found when you were going through that hardship and that difficulty? So have you learned any new skills in your challenges, and have they helped you to adapt when things were tough? And sometimes we say, and even the Bible says this in Romans, is that we can rejoice in suffering because it produces endurance and character produces hope. So sometimes character is born in times of crisis, in times of struggle. This is truly when our strengths and our ability to stretch around our struggles comes to light. Because anybody can be cooperative and patient when things are going well, but how do we respond, and how does our character respond when there are challenges that come to light? And of course, we're going to face challenges as well. Challenges can happen because of things like developmental issues, perfectionistic expectations from the parents, too much overprotectiveness. Of course, we want to protect our kids, but stifling them from growing in times of challenge can come when we're overly protective. If we are inconsistent in our parenting, if we're modeling poor qualities and poor responses to challenges, if there are physical influences around us that are outside of our control, sometimes we can have faulty thinking that can impact how we deal with those struggles and those challenges. And sometimes there could be family issues that are overwhelming, as well as mental health issues that can be overwhelming. Challenges can come from many forms. This is not a comprehensive list by any means, but oftentimes the struggle I see in working with clients, patients, and students are related to these issues: health crises, workplace issues, feeling empty or lonely, family and friend issues, a sense of failure after a loss or after an inability to complete a task. Sometimes financial crises can feel overwhelming, desire to choose different careers and to fit into a certain place. If they're feeling some things are not fair, or they've experienced trauma or inner peace issues, or again, mental health issues, all of these can contribute to challenges, and challenges can come in many more areas than this as well. So this, of course, can create a lot of stress. And believe it or not, stress can come from good things as well as from bad things. Imagine, for example, you as a parent got a promotion. With that comes a lot more responsibility, another title, maybe some more time that you have to spend into work, or some adjustment. So even though it's a good thing to get a promotion, this can still create a lot of stress. So even good things can create stress. Of course, difficult experiences can create stress as well, such as, financial issues in the family or health issues. Of course, those can create stress as well. And stress is any time the body needs to respond to something that has been placed upon it in some way. Of course, kids are navigating lots of different things. The older they get, they have more responsibilities, potentially a job, potentially navigating school, college choices, making friends, doing lots of different things. And they can adapt and adjust, and that's hopefully what we'll learn about today. Or they can, maladjust to those changes, and that can create some difficulties for them as well. Stress can be very beneficial at times, and we'll talk about that. And stress can also be very harmful. So stress, if it stays in the green and the yellow zone here, in those situations, we are using that stress to help us to get focused, to help us to get motivated, to help us to have not boredom, but some optimal stress that will get us moving to move towards a goal. For example, if your kids have an exam at the end of the week, they should feel this healthy tension, this healthy stress that will motivate them to ask their teachers questions, to create study groups, and to prepare themselves for this exam, and to study a little bit harder this week than maybe they normally would. However, if we don't have enough coping skills to help us to deal with those difficulties, this is where stress can be overwhelming and can even make us physically and mentally ill. It can make us exhausted, panicked, anxious, depressed. It can even lead to overload and burnout and even disease, both again from a mental and a psychological perspective and health perspective. So again, what are some stressors that kids are facing? Sometimes their schedule is too ambitious. Sometimes they have too much on their plate and they can't balance all of these things with school, with extracurricular activities, maybe college applications, and things like that. School itself can be quite stressful. There is a lot of competition. They want to compete with their peers and with their friends. They also may be running late at times that may make them to feel stressed. They may absorb things from their parents, like their parents' finances, or feeling responsible for things that their parents aren't covering. They may feel too many responsibilities and not enough free time. Everyday things like traffic and technology glitches can create lots of stress. If they're not spending enough alone time to shut out the noise of the world and the difficulties of the world and spending some time with God, that can impact their stress level as well. If they don't have enough time being spent with good support networks, and we'll see later on with the resilience research that having even one consistent member in their life, person in their life, can truly impact how much resilience they have. Even one consistent person, even outside of their parents or their family. If they don't have enough downtime, if they're absorbing family difficulties and marital difficulties from their family, or communication difficulties and misunderstandings, they can absorb that stress as well. Also, stress from parents. Parents are also overwhelmed, doing many different things, wearing many different hats. And this can lead to a lack of understanding and a lack of communication with their children. Parents may even demand perfection, compare them to their siblings or their cousins or their friends. These can create lots of stressful issues. And again, issues that the parents have themselves can trickle down into the children. Also, if the parents are of a different generation, maybe they have come from another country and their ideals and values may be different than the children where they're growing up in the United States or in the West or in other countries, they may have different values, and this can create some tension as well. So all of these things can create a lot of difficulties and challenges for raising the children, but there are solutions, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. And so one of the ways to notice if your child is struggling is that they may experience bodily sensations and feelings. They can have physical things like headaches or stomach aches. They may have muscle twitches or issues with their skin that can signify that there is stress going on. They may be overly worried. They can't focus or think clearly. They may make hasty decisions that are not necessarily good decisions. They may feel a loss of confidence and apathy and just emotionless at times because they're so overwhelmed. Unfortunately, some may turn to substances. Hopefully that doesn't become the issue, or they may lose sleep or lose their appetite or become more accident prone. All of these are signs that stress has become overwhelming and we need to take action to become more resilient. So oftentimes kids that are facing all of these stressors can either hold in their emotions and their problems and not talk to anyone and become more depressed. They can also really act out. They can become anxious. They can have less self-esteem, or they can increase in ups and downs in their emotions, including sadness when they're feeling stressed. Sometimes they can't even verbalize what they're saying, and we need to intervene and have conversations with them. So with all of these things around us, we want to give them more coping skills. And that is kind of the purpose of our talk today, is how to give them more coping skills so that the stresses are at least a little bit balanced, or maybe the coping skills can even be more than the stressors that they are experiencing. That is hopefully our goal. And so there's a Japanese proverb that is also a verse from Proverbs 24:16 that says, even though we fall 7 times, we can stand up 8 times. And again, the same thing is in Proverbs 24:16 that talks about a righteous man falls 7 times and rises again. And so we can bring this ability to stand back up again after a challenge or a difficulty and not just succumb to the struggles that we are experiencing. And it's important to understand that these principles are things that biblical characters have experienced throughout the Bible. In the Old Testament and the New Testament, we see many characters that have gone through lots of struggles, lots of challenges. Job and Joseph and Daniel and the 3 men that were in the fire in Daniel's time. And then through those struggles and those difficulties, they are able to come back from them even stronger. And so the Bible tells us in Romans 8:28 that all things work together for good for those who love God and are called for a purpose. And no matter how many times we get knocked down, even if you've had a failure, even if you've had a struggle, you can get up again. But we're going to learn that there are no quick fixes, and that we have to sometimes struggle and persevere to achieve. And so we have to be tenacious. You may not always win, but every time you get up, you get closer and closer to your goals, and you're able to find the goals and the places that you want to go and the strengths that are going to get you there. So in order to survive, we have to adapt and to grow around the challenge. and to survive first, and then to also thrive after that difficulty. So rising up is a process. Anytime we go through a difficulty, there will be some grief involved with that. But resilience is a muscle to build over a lifetime. Research does not tell us that resilience is built overnight. There is nothing in nature or in ourselves that develops overnight. It is a muscle to grow and to develop. And sometimes there is some grief in that process, but also some acceptance that there is some change happening, that there will be some growth out of it. What can we learn out of this situation? What have I learned about my own ability to stand and to be strong and to learn where my strengths are? How can I stretch around those things? But again, there is some grief. We're not minimizing the grief. We're not minimizing that there was a challenge or a difficulty. In fact, we are validating the difficulties that you are going through. So resilience isn't about ignoring the pain and the difficulty. It's about learning how to adapt to those challenges and those difficulties. So it's about persevering. It's about connecting with others. It's about growing and learning how to be resilient eventually and to thrive, even though you've gone through this difficulty. So resilience is not the absence of grief or of difficulty. It is the conscious choice to experience the full spectrum of our human emotions, but not to be consumed by them, and in fact, to thrive despite them. So how does research tell us we respond to difficulty? For some people, we just succumb and give up, and our functioning is deeply impaired. And oftentimes there is support in therapy and in medicine to help us to come out of that succumbing phase. Other people just survive and continue to function. And sometimes this has impairment and sometimes it doesn't, but they're just kind of going through the motions and just continuing to survive and just function at the bare minimum. Other people dip below their baseline of where their baseline used to be, and then they come back up to baseline and just stay at baseline. But hopefully through this presentation and through some of the research, even the older research that we saw, is that people will thrive beyond their original level of functioning. They'll go beyond their baseline and thrive and surpass where they were before. And research also tells us that resilience is kind of like a chain reaction, that once it starts, we learn and learn and learn and keep going and see where our strengths are. And it's a snowball effect of goodness that helps us to get through the challenges and the difficulties and the pain that we've been through. So again, what are some of the stages of resilience? Initially, people, when they're going through a struggle, may experience some denial. And this is a defense because your mind is so overwhelmed by the grief of what it's experiencing or the difficulty or the challenge. It may be so shocked by this difficulty that it experiences denial. And then there's a grief process that occurs because you've realized you've lost something, or the way of life that it was before is not the same that it is now, and that things are going to change, whether that's a loss or a transition. You realize that there has been a loss, but you're not succumbing to that loss. You're not going to give into it. Instead, you're going to search for meaning, search for connection, and maybe even reminisce about the past, but also hoping for a positive future. And you may not understand everything that is happening in this moment, but as you look back, you can see the areas that you were strong. You can see the areas where you had some challenge and difficulties and felt like you couldn't go on. But slowly, by putting one foot in front of the other, you start having hope and meaning and purpose once again. So if our children are going through a challenge, do not for any reason, just brush it under the rug or say they're still young and we're not going to worry about this. It'll just pass and everything will be okay. And we're not going to talk about this problem. But if they're coming to talk to you about it, and even maybe probe them with questions and acknowledge and validate that they're going through a transition or a struggle or a difficulty or a pain, engage with them and communicate. And we're going to talk in one of the other talks later on about how to communicate resiliently, but engage with them and communicate. Find the positive gifts and talents and strengths that each child has and help them to celebrate even the smallest successes that they're having during this time of struggle. Help them to problem solve, walk with them in their problem solving, and promote their resilience by watching them as they grow, encouraging them, leaving room for growth. And if there are struggles and failures along the way, help them to pick back up again and to keep walking and to reevaluate throughout this journey that you are walking together. So first you need to acknowledge that this is a unique and difficult time, validate their feelings, be warm, be genuine, be empathetic, be consistent and patient, help them to identify their strengths, and accept that this is a challenging time, but don't give into it. Keep trying, keep problem solving, keep putting one foot in front of the other. It's okay to be upset at times, but remember that humans have been created by our Creator to be remarkably adaptable and resilient. And research even backs this up, that we can be adaptable and we can grow around that challenge. Again, validate first, validate their difficulties and their challenges, but also know that we're remarkably adaptable and resilient. Listen, listen, listen to what they have to say. Again, we're going to talk about communication at a later time, but acknowledge their emotions. Ask them open-ended questions to see where they're coming from. Answer their questions to identify even more emotions and what their understanding of the situation is. Give them advice, yes, but first ask them how they plan to solve this, to see where they're thinking, where their head is at, and then work through this problem together. This empowers them, but also lets them know that you have their back and that you're going to support them and that you're going to help them deal with this crisis or this challenge, and that you're not going to leave them alone. But you're also empowering them by giving them the ability to kind of solve the problem alongside you. So the first step is they're going to reveal some things to you. You're going to listen. And then in the process of that, you're going to gain understanding of what they're feeling, what their struggle is. And you can have some empathy by stepping into their shoes and understanding where their challenges and what their difficulties are. Even if they can't name complex emotions, you can at least start with these 4 basic emotions. Most people are happy, or they're afraid for some reason, and this puts some trepidation in what they're doing, some pausing. Sometimes they may feel sad at a loss or at a challenge or at a difficulty. And sometimes they may feel anger, which can oftentimes reveal that there's some sort of injustice happening in their world, or there is something underneath that emotion as well. Even with really young children, you can give them faces like this that they can pick from, and they can identify their emotions. And for older kids and even adults, they can use this color wheel to identify center emotions and then branch out to more complex emotions. The more we're able to name our emotions, the more we're able to problem solve and deal with those emotions and deal with the complexity of those feelings. You should also help your children to identify their strengths. Most parents are focusing on things like academics, and that is, of course, super important. But there are different levels of intelligences, and we can talk about that as well. I think it's been identified that there are 8 or 9 different kinds of intelligences, not just from an academic category. It could be musical, or it could be math and science, or it could be empathy and understanding other people's emotions. But there are many things that kids can be strong in. And a lot of this comes naturally to them, and they can develop it and cultivate it a little bit more by identifying things that they both enjoy and things that they are good at. Research has identified for us globally 24 character strengths that we can find in each of us, no matter who we are, no matter what age we are. This has been normed for kids age 10 and up. And in these character strengths, we find the positive makeup character parts of our character. And so we can measure these things, and we can measure these character strengths and our positive traits of our personality. And the great thing about this is that each one of us has these 24 character strengths. They are virtues that are parts of our personality. They cannot be lost. So talents can be lost, believe it or not. You could have a talent, let's say, to play the piano, and you stop practicing playing the piano. And so you kind of lose that talent with time. But this is something that we tap into without even realizing on a daily basis. And the more that we are able to tap into these strengths and recognize them and use them, the more comfortable we will feel to deal with challenges and struggles and stressors. So these are 24 character strengths, again, that we all house inside of us. We need to identify them, cultivate them, and process them when we are going through a challenge or a struggle. We also want to help our kids turn their weaknesses into strengths. Turn them into creativity, into ideas, into problem solving, into taking that challenge as a puzzle to be solved, not as something that is insurmountable, that I can't deal with and that I can't process. So again, they should know as your parent that you can, they're going to turn to you, you're going to help them to problem solve, and we're going to turn what feels like a weakness into problem solving and into new solutions. Kids also need to kind of sometimes face acceptance. And this doesn't mean that I resign to this problem and just give up. This means that I'm recognizing that there is a challenge and there's a difficulty, but sometimes there are challenges in life. We can't always get rid of every single problem just by snapping our fingers. So for example, with this example, if it's raining, somebody can just start complaining that it's raining. I wish it wasn't raining. My day would be better. If it wasn't raining, this day is ruined. Why can't it be sunny? And start talking in this negative perspective. Instead, you can say it is raining and problem solve. Take an umbrella or change some things around so you don't get too wet, and change your plans around. Instead of being outdoors, maybe you can take your plans indoors. And so sometimes with acceptance, we are also problem solving towards not giving up and just succumbing to the fact that it's raining, but again, adapting to that situation and that difficulty that is around us. We also want to celebrate all that you have accomplished and all that you have achieved and balance those things with the difficulty that you're facing. What did you learn out of this difficulty? What went well? Where can we adjust? How can I challenge myself the next time I come across this type of difficulty? Did I grow in any way? Did I learn in any way? Are there still areas in my life that need balance? Maybe, for example, I'm spending too much time with my friends as opposed to studying for a test, and that created an unnecessary stressor. So maybe I need to create some more balance in my life where I spend time with my friends on the weekend, but maybe study for my exam during the week, thus preventing an unnecessary stressor. Even if there are challenges that are outside of my control, family finances, family illnesses, family marital struggles, are there areas that I can focus on? And maybe those other areas can be dealt with the adults or dealt with supports that are outside, but focusing on what I've learned out of that situation. And so when they've done research on people that have gone through struggles, they have found over and over and over themes of growth, themes of altruism, themes of kindness, even in the midst of struggle. One of my favorite ones here is a quote that says, difficulties give us perspective. It kind of shuts out all of the other noise that is outside and teaches us to be kind to others, to be kind to ourselves, that we need supportive people. Who are the right supportive people? And then what is meaningful? Where is their gratitude? And what meaning can I ascertain out of this difficulty? Even in times of perseverance, even in times of difficulties, people will persevere. They will often say, I will fight against this struggle. If I want to accomplish a big goal, I have to try one step at a time. And these are all quotes that came out of people being studied during times of struggle. So it's not about never failing. It's about rising up every time we do fail, and how do we move ourselves forward little by little. So perseverance is not about having good luck or good things that happen to us all the time, but it's about being steadfast and being long-suffering, like the Bible says in the fruits of the Spirit. Even when there is delay in getting what we want, and even if we haven't really achieved success yet towards what we want. And so in doing this perseverance, this also can lead to resilience. In order to be resilient, we should be perseverant. And so sometimes, we can wait and see what's going to happen if we don't give up. And enthusiasm can be common, but endurance is what is rare. And we want to choose to get back up even when we have certain amounts of difficulties. So again, research tells us that when there is perseverance, we can have lots of joy, unshakable happiness, if we look for opportunities of growth, even in the challenge. What have I learned out of this difficult situation? How can I grow? How can I savor stillness and listen to my own voice and God's voice, and what can I glean about my strengths and my knowledge out of this challenging time. We should also realize that nothing is insurmountable, even if it seems incredibly difficult. Again, we're not minimizing the difficulty, we are validating it, but also accepting that there are challenges and changes that come with life. But we can make connections, take decisive action, change our fear to faith, and move towards action to help us to move our situations forward. We also want to persevere because this leads to learning, and learning leads to adaptability, and adaptability leads us to resilience and to growth. So we've been talking a lot about this word resilience, and we often hear it in difficult times and challenging times in the media and all over the place. However, it is a science that's been around for about nearly 50 years now, talking about what makes people thrive when they have been through a difficulty. And so resilience is about three specific categories that are kind of intertwined with each other. Resilient people are people that can adapt to a challenge. They are flexible, not really rigid in the difficulties they're experiencing, and they are willing to learn and to grow. So again, just like this flower that is growing here, even if everything around it is arid and dry and not nutrient rich, it has still found a way to grow. It has pulled resources from wherever it can in order to grow and to thrive. It also is about keeping things in perspective and adapting and learning along the way to do new things. Some older research suggests that this is an upward spiral of well-being. People that are resilient can see multiple possibilities, not just have tunnel vision for the difficulty that they're in. They tend to see the world more optimistically, and they increase their repertoire or tool belt of coping skills. Even if life hands them a bad hand, they try to play that hand pretty well. You've all heard the saying probably that when life gives us lemons, we don't bemoan that, we instead try to make lemonade. And so to cultivate resilience, again, you're pulling resources from many different sources. And when they're kids, they're going to lean a lot on having a strong connection with their parents, problem solving with them, labeling their emotions. Again, the parents not rushing to fix the problem, but to walk with them in the problem. We also want to demonstrate and model good coping skills. Even if there's no silver lining, this could definitely be a terrible situation. But have we learned something from that terrible situation? How can we use that to grow in the future? What strengths did I utilize? What strengths did I lean on? And did I establish meaning and embrace the mistakes that I make in order to learn from them? The American Psychological Association has made a task force in the past that looks at promoting resilience and says that if we make connections and again avoid seeing this as an insurmountable problem and accepting that change is a part of living, these are all things that we can do to accept that this is a part of our life, but we can also move towards goals by taking decisive actions. Maybe I learned something about myself during this crisis. Maybe I can look for opportunities of self-discovery and keep things in perspective. It's also really important to take care of ourselves during a struggle, meaning to eat healthy, to sleep enough, to exercise where we can, to connect with other people, and to have a hopeful outlook. Also, every person that has gone through some sort of struggle at some point or another has been resilient, and this is why they are standing where they're standing today. And so it's important to reflect back on other areas where you were strong, other areas that you took challenge and learned from it and grew. And how do you deconstruct those memories, and where do you find escape points and growth points so that we can grow from those vulnerabilities, and how did we do so in the past? So for example, lots of kids have started school this week or last week, and many of them have been very nervous about doing so. So validate their feelings, validate their feelings. It is, of course, a nerve-wracking kind of experience to go to new teachers. And if you're switching from elementary to middle or middle to high school, you're changing buildings. It's a lot of new faces. Of course, those things are difficult, but you have transitioned in the past. You've transitioned maybe from, preschool to kindergarten, or from kindergarten to elementary. And you did those things well, even though the first few days were hard. So you're looking back to see how you've escaped from difficult times and challenges in the past, and then applying that to today's problem. You are challenging yourself, gathering corroborating information, maybe from teachers or from parents. How did you transition from grade to grade in the past, even though you were nervous? And once you've gathered that information, use similar resources to help you to brainstorm a way out of the problem that you are in currently. You're using the past, the present situation, and a hopeful future to get through that difficult problem. Another thing that is often a difficulty is that self-esteem will often be impacted. And so people will put their heads in the sand, like this guy, when there's a problem, rather than turning to relationships and resources and facing the problem head on. So oftentimes people, let's say there's an exam that they're worried about or a financial issue they're worried about, they'll just keep putting off dealing with it over and over and over again, and the problem gets larger and larger and larger. Whereas if we had just faced it, and faced it by getting support from other individuals and talking about it and problem solving, we can save ourselves a lot of difficulties and challenges. We should encourage our kids to reframe the problem that they are experiencing with positive emotions, creating meaning out of that difficult situation, again, focusing on their points of strength rather than their points of weakness. And again, accepting that adversity is part of life and part of the challenges that we will face, but that we are survivors, we are resilient, we can be adaptable and flexible. So again, here are some many things. I won't go through all of these in the interest of time, but again, kids that get support from parents, teachers, coaches, their priest, their father of confession, servants at Sunday school. This reaffirms ties that they're not alone and that they can actively cope with the struggles that they're going through. You could teach them some relaxation techniques and finding ways to help them to take care of themselves mentally and physically, so they're not necessarily just dealing with this problem by themselves and feeling all alone. We want to help them to reframe. Their mind is a very powerful entity that can help them to reframe from negative to positive. And in fact, they can change a lot about their world if they start thinking from a positive perspective. If they start thinking of themselves as a failure, as a person who's experienced a challenge, remind them of a time that they were successful and that they took on a challenge and succeeded in doing so. So reframing is a big part of what we do with individuals as well. And sometimes we can't change our circumstances, but let's change how we think about them. A lovely quote here from Viktor Frankl, who was a big advocate of resilience and finding meaning and purpose in difficulty. He says, when we are no longer able to change a situation or a circumstance, we are challenged to change ourselves. So what can we change to make this problem work for us? Where can we be flexible? Where can we problem solve? Where can we compromise in order to solve this problem? Research also tells us, at least more current research, tells us that when we mindfully notice the good that is happening in our lives, when we practice gratitude, we are actually shifting our perspective from what is not going well towards what is going well. And so the good appreciates when we appreciate the good. And of course, the church in its wisdom has been saying the Thanksgiving prayer for over 2,000 years. And now science is also catching up that gratitude really helps us to change our perspective from what is not going well to what is going well. Even if we list 2 or 3 things that we are grateful for every day, our perspective starts to change little by little. Research also tells us that helping others builds resilience, because we see that we can be beneficial and have meaning, and we can support others through their struggles, even though we have struggles ourselves. But it shows us that we can be meaningful, and this can help us with our resilience as well. Again, applying your own story of resilience. You have some, just look at past stories where you were resilient and applying those tools to today. This research, a lot of these 10 positive emotions overlap with the fruits of the spirit. And again, these emotions have been shown that when we practice these emotions on a day-to-day basis, it helps us to problem solve and helps us to grow in our development of problem solving and solutions, rather than just wallowing in our difficulties and our challenges. And research also tells us that when we savor positive experiences, that means to slow down and to pay attention to the good things that are happening around us and to journal about them or to take a picture and to visualize those good things that are happening. We tend to store those memories in the bank in our mind and then maybe withdraw from them when things are not going so well. And so it is really important to slow down and to savor and to take in the good things that are happening around us, no matter what those things are. Even if you see a pretty flower or enjoying your cup of coffee conversations with your friends or slowing down and savoring your lunch, in these experiences you are storing and banking good positive emotions to withdraw from later when things are not going so well. Many things that you could do to cope with negative feelings, but two things I want to point out is, again, to accept that changes sometimes happen, but to accept them and then to act in a way that is positive, and also to solve problems as they come so they don't accumulate. Also, if you're getting overwhelmed, it's okay to say no to some things. Don't keep piling things on, and deal with frustrating emotions by taking a walk, maybe listening to some hymns or some softer music or things like that, so you don't feel overwhelmed. People that journal, people that do art, also tend to find ways to cope with their difficulties and their challenges. In this way, we are paying attention to resilience across our physical, mental, social, and spiritual selves. Physically, we want to pay attention to things like nutrition and sleep. Mentally, we want to pay attention to where we can be adaptable, how we have ability to kind of have positive thinking and grow around our challenges. Socially, we want to connect with people who will support us, teamwork, giving and delegating things to other people so we don't feel so overwhelmed. And obviously, from a spiritual perspective, can we lean on our clergy? Can we pray? Can we turn our perspective to God and learn to yield to prayer and to what God is trying to tell us so that we can be resilient on all fronts? This is one of my favorite pictures. I often put this into my presentations, and I actually have a print of this in my office because we do have potential. Things don't happen and develop overnight. You will develop your character if you are patient, if you pay attention to your thoughts and your words and your actions and your habits and your character. And so this painting is a lovely painting from all the way back in 1936. It's a painting of the self-portrait of the artist, Rene Magritte. And he's looking at an egg, which looks like it has no potential. It's not moving, it's not growing, it's not its full potential. And yet he's drawing what will be the full potential. So we have to see ourselves as having this full potential, even if we're not quite there at the moment. We will grow, we will develop with hard work, with perseverance, and with using these resilience skills. And so to kind of summarize everything, in order to become more resilient, to be resilient with your child, have it become a habit to express gratitude every day. 2 or 3 things that you're grateful for in that day. Could be a small thing, could be a large thing, could be someone sat with them at lunch today and that made them feel good, even if it's for 10 minutes. But expressing gratitude changes our perspective, helping them to identify their strengths and use them, helping them to slow down and not rush through everything in life, the good or the bad, and instead to learn from those experiences and finding good experiences in every day, because that will help them to identify those things that are going well. We also want to use positive emotions. This helps broaden our perspective, helps us to build new problem-solving skills, and helps us to grow. Everybody has a story of resilience. Where were you resilient in the past? Examine that story and use similar tools, and also be altruistic and kind to others. And so that brings us really to the end of our talk. I have a few questions that came through. And the first one is about a person who has a 14-year-old son, who recently relocated and changed school. This person is very stressed that they can't sleep well. They're very worried they can't achieve well. So how can we help this 14-year-old boy? And of course, again, validating that transitions are hard is very, very important. Maybe name a time where you had gone through a transition and it was hard. Maybe you went to a new job, maybe you went to a new state or a new city, and you experienced difficulty. So you are joining with your child in that they are not alone, that you're empathetically understanding them and understanding the struggles that they're going through, but then also help them to problem solve. Where are there some classes where you may see someone nice that you can sit next to, or ask your teacher to help you to maybe have a group project with someone that you can communicate with. And that it's, of course, okay to be nervous, but also let's problem solve and find solutions, and find some good things that are going on throughout your day that will help you to transition slowly, to not be too hard on yourself if you haven't made any best friends in a week or 2 weeks even, but to do something every day to help you to problem solve through that situation. Maybe, like I said, do a group project with someone. Also lean on your strengths. What strengths have you used in the past to make friends? Maybe you are a kind individual or a helpful individual or a loyal individual. How can you use those skills to help you to identify new friends? Another thing that these kids can do is to join clubs in school of things that they're interested in, where they will find like-minded other kids and they can communicate with them in that regard because they're already in the same pool and have the same interests. Another question that came through is someone's daughter who's a senior in high school has a crush on another kid, and that person left her. And now she feels inadequate and does not want to appear in school or church. So again, it's very easy to focus on our inadequacies or our weaknesses. But again, there are strengths, and it's important to remind that child of their strengths. Of course, validate their emotions that being rejected is very hurtful, but it doesn't mean it's a reflection on them. Maybe it just wasn't a good fit. Maybe this person is not a good fit for them. And maybe they need to find a person that is a better fit for them. But also understand and validate that rejection is very, very, very painful and that it does hurt. But again, putting one foot in front of the other, making newer friends as you grieve the fact that this person was not interested in interacting with them. You can do both simultaneously. So part of resilience is also about being simultaneous. I can be sad about the rejection, but also have hope that I can find a friendship that is more in line with who I am and who is interested in me, just like I am interested in them. The third question that came through is about two spouses that are separated. It looks like they have two daughters, and they are not taking this situation very well. One of the daughters in particular is withdrawn, and the other one she's concerned about her because she's acting out and is not wanting to go to school or do homework. So if you remember one of the earlier slides, we had talked about what people do when they're going through struggle. Sometimes kids act out, sometimes they take it internally. Either way, hopefully both parents are involved in these kids' lives and tell them that they're still loved very much despite the separation. But even if one parent is not around and not doing what they should do as a parent and not contributing to that child's life, it's still really important to know that you are loved by the other parent and by other people, and that while the situation is very difficult, it is not something that you have created or something that you have done, but that you are very loved and you have talents and you have strengths, and it is important that you cultivate those strengths so that you can find meaning and purpose, even though you're going through this difficult situation. Again, validating this child's emotions that they have either lost the security of both parents together, or maybe lost the security of seeing one of the parents. They are still very much loved by others. And again, research even tells us that even one consistent person can alter that person's life and make their life more meaningful. And so being consistent with them and finding others that will be consistent with them is going to be the key there. But of course, it's important to know that they did not create this problem. They are still loved, they have purpose, they have meaning, and they have talents. So these are the questions that have come through. Tomorrow we have Processing Life with Autism with our speaker, Sylvia Zaki, on our speech pathologist, and that will bring us very good information as well. adding more tools to our tool belt to help us to become more resilient and to help us to grow as individuals from a social perspective, from a biological perspective, from a psychological perspective, and of course, from a spiritual perspective, because we are holistic beings. So thank you for tuning in today and for listening to this talk on resilience. And tune in for the rest of the series as well. Thank you again to Light for Orphans and for CYC for bringing this series together and for inviting me to speak on this important topic of resilience. I hope you all become resilient and thrive. Thank you.